Today's lecture, we're going to go over another creational design pattern called the singleton. The singleton pattern is a creational design pattern that ensures a class has only one instance and provides a global access point to the instance. A metaphor for this pattern is a singleton is like an exclusive club membership card that grants access to a private club. Only one card exists and all members share the same access. In the singleton pattern, just like the exclusive club membership, there's only one instance of the class that is accessible to all parts of the application. A few benefits this pattern provides is it ensures only one class instance, it provides a global access point, and it is initialized only when requested the first time. A couple disadvantages is it makes unit testing difficult since many test frameworks rely on inheritance when producing mock objects. It also requires special treatment in a multi-threaded environment, such as Java, so that multiple threads won't create a singleton object several times. A use case for when to consider this pattern is when a class in your program should have just a single instance available to all clients. For example, a single database object shared by different parts of the program. So in the case of a database, for an example of a singleton, that is exactly what I'm going to demonstrate to you guys. And if we look over here to the left, I have a diagram of a singleton here, which you see that the client calls a singleton and the singleton makes an instance from itself. So we'll go ahead and start this. We'll go ahead and start coding, and I'm going to start off by creating a singleton, and this is going to be called a database. The database is going to have a property, and we're going to call this an instance. It will be private and static, and the type is of database. Because when we create an instance internally, we're going to store it inside this object, and this is where we're going to store the reference of the database instance. Next, we're going to go ahead and create a constructor here. But this constructor will have a private keyword in front of it. So now, by making this private here, then that means that outside of the class, we can't go new database like so. So how are we going to do that? If the constructor is private, how are we going to create a new instance of the database? Well, the way we're going to do that is we're going to create a static method here, which is going to be public. And it's going to be called getInstance. What's special about this method that allows us to avoid creating a new instance from outside is that we will have a condition here that will check that if this instance already has a value of the database. And if not, then we're going to create the database instance here. And if it does, then we're just going to make use of the already existing instance that exists here. So let's go ahead and see how that looks in code. We're going to start off with the if condition and check if this dot instance is equal to null, meaning that there's no database instance value here yet, then we're going to go ahead and create a new database instance. And we're going to assign it to this .instance. If the instance already exists with a if a database instance exists in this property here, then this block of code will never run, and instead it will simply return the currently existing instance. Okay, so this is all we need for the singleton. This is how short it is, and this is why this pattern is considered by many the easiest to implement, and as you can see, likely the shortest to implement in terms of code. So let's go ahead now and run some tests on this. So now remember that I said that since this constructor is private, we can't do new database like so. Instead, we have this static method here, which essentially by making it static, we're saying that this method belongs to the class and not each individual object instance that is created from this database class. Okay, so instead of doing this here, which if I was to store this in a variable like so, we won't do this, but instead we will go ahead and call the database class itself and call the method that belongs to it, which is getInstance. So this we can do here. And let's go ahead and see, let's go ahead and console log this and see what we get here. Let's do db. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this console here. I'm going to run this code. And you see we get a database instance. But remember that the singleton, the purpose of a singleton is to ensure that we have only one instance of this database class. So what if I was to go ahead and duplicate this, and I'm going to go ahead and call the first one db1 and the second one db2, and I'm going to check if they're equal. So I'm going to say, is db1 equal to db2? I'm going to run this code, and it says true. Why? Because this first one here goes ahead and calls this getInstance method, right? So it's going to go here. It's going to run this. It's going to go through this if condition because at this point there's no value of the instance. It's just going to be null. So it's going to go through this if block statement and create a new instance and store it in our instance property here. But then the second time around that we call this is going to run this method, and it's going to see that the instance here is not null, so it will not run this code, but instead it's going to go ahead and return the already existing database instance that we have that's stored here. So that is why these two are equal, because they are pointing to the same instance. We are not creating two separate database instances. They are pointing to the same. They are the same. So that is why we get the value of true here. But now, what would happen if what do you think would happen if we remove these conditions here, and instead of checking if an instance is already, if it exists, what if we just create it, or let's go ahead actually, and I'm gonna go ahead and comment this out. I'm gonna copy this, comment this out, and I'll show you here. So what if we were to comment this part out here? So we don't have any condition, but instead if we were to say, go ahead and create a new database instance, and we'll go ahead and store that in the instance property and return it. So there's no condition that's checking if it already exists, and if it does, just make use of the already existing one. So what do you think will happen here? Well, let's go ahead and have a look. So the same thing, right? We have two separate calls to the get instance here, right? And we have them right here. And I'm going to check if they're equal. We saw earlier that it was true, that they were the same. So, but now let's go ahead and see what we get. See, now this time it's false, because it is essentially this piece of code here, this condition, that allows us that ensures that only one instance is created of the database. So this piece of code is crucial to making this implementation happen, in addition to making the constructor private here as well. Okay, so there you have it. There's your singleton. It's very short in comparison to other patterns you will encounter, and by far the easiest. Okay, so hopefully you were able to get some value from this. Go ahead, if you like this, like, subscribe, and comment.